Thanks, Deputy Connolly, and thanks, Cian. Well, obviously Brexit is the overarching issue, even when you look through these conclusions, Minister. But I think it has to be remembered again the responsibility the European Union has for the incredible mess that we're in right now. I mean, it was the European Union that insisted on separate negotiations for the withdrawal, the divorce treaty, if you like, and separate negotiations for the future relationship. Yet, you know, when you think about it, any divorce, the basic premise is that you're going to have the future relationship to the forefront of whatever happens. But that's not what happened with the European Union, and it is the reason why people have consistently compared it to the Eagles' old song, to Hotel California. You can check out any time, but you can never leave. And you know that's the way they've organised things is part of the responsibility, not just the horrendous Tory party and its crazy ideas, as my colleagues were talking about earlier on. And now we're left with a situation with less than 100 days to go. Is it 99 days now? We've British government ministers, buying fridges, beginning to ramp up the direct leave situation, the exit situation for the end of March. We're also placed, it's profoundly affecting us. Even the timing of our general election now has been affected by what will happen. So we're left in a really profound mess. But we should remember the responsibility of the European Union itself for this. I know in some of the conclusions there were references to the multi-annual financial framework and that they were progressing, and the single resolution fund. And while these measures, of course, do shore up the euro, our own fiscal freedom may be circumscribed, especially in relation to continuing to meet the fiscal rules. Minister, you might remember before I spoke about the grave reservations across the European Union about President Macron's proposals for a federal European Union, which I think most people in Ireland share. And of course his Thatcherite economic policies have now thankfully received a severe setback due to the uprising of les Gilets jaunes over the past 6 or 7 weeks in Paris and the other French cities. But this relentless pressure, I think, from France and Germany to move to a federal-style EU budget, I think continues to pose significant dangers for our country and for other smaller states. Many times, of course, I've noted again the growing net contribution of this country to the budget of the European Union, and post-Brexit, of course, that's going to be even larger still. I note one thing, Minister, that you don't seem to have had any discussion whatsoever about quantitative easing, about the withdrawal by the European Central Bank of quantitative easing, and the fact that they won't be buying assets anymore. And I mean, surely that's going to have a huge impact in 2019, 2020 and onwards, because it did provide a stabilising backdrop, I suppose, although I profoundly disagreed with that approach, because it rewarded those who had property and who had assets rather than actually spending the money on the ordinary citizens of the European Union. I note obviously that in Pillar 3 there was discussion about migration, European Border and Coast Guard, Asylum Agency, the Return Directive, Common European Asylum System. And perhaps the Minister, again, I'm not sure if the Taoiseach got a chance to, you need to spell out clearly, I think, what impacts these proposed institutions will have on our country and on our management, indeed, of our own borders. I notice again, of course, a reiteration of the PESCO plans. I was one of the I think was 45 of us in this chamber, who objected to the permanent structure cooperation and who have grave fears, particularly when we saw you commenting in one of the conclusions in relation to what happened in the Kerch Straits off the Sea of Azov and the standoff between Ukraine and Russia. And again, like grave concerns that the European Union and ourselves will be dragged into any kind of militaristic conflict in that region, differences between those two countries that can only be settled, in fact, by peaceful discussions. But, Minister, I suppose the overarching concern that we do have is that we're left in the most uncertain position, I suppose, over this Christmas that the country has been in since maybe 1945, and with the UK government making these dramatic moves for a cliff-edge Brexit, it certainly does seem to put us in a very sombre situation. So again, I wish you well in the remaining discussions, but it is a very critical moment, I think, for our country. Thanks, Cian.